Welcome to Frequency. I'm Jenny Field.
And I'm Chuck Gose. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And Jenny, it is only middle of January, and it already feels like we've been through a year. It seems like it. At least here in the U.S., it certainly feels that way. So I decided we haven't reflected on like how's your year? So I want to do a check-in with you. Like, how's your year started so far?
So a little bit chaotic for me, which is no bad thing, but we had a big client project. So I just feel like my diary has felt more chaotic than normal for me because we've just had to do a lot of one-to-one conversations. I'm pleased that I have got back to running after Christmas. So we had a lot of we had a bit of snow and ice down here in the south of the UK, which means that we can't do anything because we're that country. So that's frustrating when you want to get out. So yeah, it's felt very busy. It's very grey and dark here, which I don't enjoy very much. And it's quite cold. But other than that, it's been smashing.
Yeah. I think for me, it's been very conflicting because like here in the States, and I know the rest of the world is watching, you almost feel guilty when you're enjoying something, knowing what is happening in other parts of the country. And it's this weird conflict of you still have to lead your life. There's still things you have to do. You can enjoy those things, but how do you properly recognize the struggles and challenges that other people are having? And it's all I see on Instagram and TikTok. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because I do think I need that reminder. I'm not getting like sucked into it in a negative way. I think I'm being sucked into it in a way of making sure that I'm paying attention to what's happening and not losing touch. But yeah, it's been it's an odd one in the States, which is always a bit weird here, but this is not one that's a fun odd, put it that way.
Yeah. And I think you have got to protect yourself a little bit. Like I hear what you're saying about I need that kind of reminder, but I think having, certain time limits on being on social media and stuff is probably quite a helpful thing to do at the moment so that it's not drowning you, which, that is important for your own well-being.
Well, we live in very suburban Indianapolis, which is probably not on any ICE target cities list. But we live in a very multicultural neighborhood. The majority of our neighbors are not white. And I love that about our neighborhood. So we've had the conversation in our house, like, where's the line for us? And the line is like, I will interrupt. I will engage. And if that means getting arrested, so be it, man. Yeah. If that's what you get arrested for, so be it.
Yeah. So yeah, I hear you. And I feel for you guys at the moment as well. But I also enjoy your Instagram stories when you do share some of the things that I don't see so much over here.
I'm just relentless.
And it's helpful.
I'm relentless.
It's helpful. And I've got my jaw open a lot of the time and just in shock of the whole thing. So, I hear you. I'm kicking things off today with some articles. I've done and I've got more than 4, which I've not done before, but there were too many things that I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to have a little chat about team size for managers. So there's some research that's come out from Gallup. We've talked about this a lot, so I thought this was quite good to have a bit of data around that. I'm also going to talk about the satisfaction gap between what employees and leaders think good communication looks like. Some research, you know me, love some research. And we've got some global survey talking about the culture gulf between execs and employees. I've got a memo from a CEO who's telling people we're not graded on effort, and I'd like to talk about that. But I'm going to kick us off with an article that I saw on Smart Brief, which is about 3 tips to replace employee stagnation with curiosity in 2026. Now, this article is from Dr. Deborah Clary, where she is sharing her own research into this topic. She's asked millennials, who now make up 35% of today's workforce, and report disengagement rates as high as 60%. And she's been asking them what drives their disengagement. And their answer was, my leader doesn't know me and doesn't care to know me. She goes on to share that millennials are not only the largest segment of today's workforce, but they're also the very group being prepared for senior leadership roles in the decade ahead, or should be. And this is where this risk is. So what are they learning about leadership on the job? Her 3 tips around this are to make curiosity contagious, create space for connection, and reward curiosity, not just results. So my question for you, Chuck, is what do you think of curiosity as the antidote to the challenge? And how can we help leaders today address this issue around disengagement with this particular population?
Yeah, I think first leaders have to want to help with this. And I don't know that we're necessarily seeing that. And I know one of the lines in here was that said that my leader doesn't know me and doesn't care to know me. And this is what employees are saying. So if leaders don't care and don't care to know people, you're not going to fix this, plain and simple. And it goes back to something we had talked about very early on in the podcast. I don't remember the study, but where people don't feel like they can even bring themselves to work or what makes them unique. They're trying to hide some of those things. You're not going to develop a culture of curiosity. If behaviors are from leadership is one saying we don't really care and we don't really care to know you, and employees don't feel like they can even share who they are, I don't see that you're going to bridge that gap. It's going to ultimately take leaders expressing that interest and wanting to fix that. And I just don't see that happening. Curiosity is an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. It's hard to be curious, though, when orders are barked at you or your meetings are slammed one-to-one. It's almost impossible. So I guess I would say to the employees, if you don't feel like you can be curious at work, be curious outside of work. Find things that open up that curiosity. Maybe it's things you can bring back into work, maybe not. But we're all naturally curious. It's just how do we stroke that a bit more?
And I'm interested in your take on that answer around my leader doesn't know me and doesn't care to know me. Do you think that that's true? Like in the sense of, do we think that leaders actually do want to know them and do want to, but they're not very good at really showing that or articulating it, or they just feel like they don't have the time? And I know you like a bit of leader bashing, so I'm opening the door.
I don't think it matters if that's how employees are feeling. It actually really doesn't matter, because if the leaders do care and that's not coming across, I mean, you're certainly not doing enough. So I don't think it matters. If that's how employees are feeling, then that's the truth.
I'm going to move us on to an article that was on fortune.com, which is Citigroup CEO Jane Fraser warns of job cuts and says it's time to raise the bar in a fiery memo to staff that says we're not graded on effort. Now, I talk to CEOs each week about challenges in the workplace. And this year, we're discussing more and more this importance of leaders being credible, the issues of disengagement and distrust. So all of this for me is showing up in this memo from Citigroup CEO Jane Fraser. It's something I hear all the time. The article says about the fact the bank is pushing ahead with about 1,000 job cuts, and the memo warned staff that we're not graded on effort, setting a tougher tone for 2026. The cuts are part of a multi-year overhaul that could ultimately eliminate up to 20,000 roles as they shift focus to hard results and an end to what Fraser calls the bank's old bad habits. In the memo that was previously reported by Bloomberg, Fraser told Citi's employees, which is about 200,000, that the bar is raised and stressed performance will be judged on outcomes rather than intentions or long hours. It just reiterates again, we're not graded on effort, we're judged on our results, she wrote, adding that she expects the last vestiges of old bad habits to disappear as the bank pursues a leaner, more commercially aggressive culture in 2026. Now, my question for you, Chuck, is that this focus on results and not effort alone is a culture shift that's happening a lot in places. I'm all for that, but how can leaders and comms teams get this message right so that it leans into purposeful and meaningful work and doesn't feel like you're just being bashed?
I don't know. I as going through this, I actually don't have a problem with this approach. We've talked about wanting leaders to be truthful and authentic. This is it. No, I don't work for Citigroup. I don't know their CEO, Jane. I don't bank with Citigroup. I don't have a Citigroup credit card, so I have no skin in the game whatsoever on this. I don't have a problem with this. This is them being, she is saying, I don't really care how hard you work. If we're not getting the results, you might lose your job. Yeah. And so at least that's out in front. I think this is almost a kind of culture be damned moment. Yeah. Like we're done trying hard. We're done. The interesting part about it is not how long you work. So maybe they're seeing that there's people putting in tons of hours and really not getting any results. So I think calling that out is fine. So I think they're sort of saying, we don't really care about your greater purpose. We don't care about if you like your job. You've got to get results. And I would rather them take this approach and be honest about it than take some other flowery approach and then later down the line actually mean these things.
Yeah. Do you feel like sometimes the reporting of this doesn't really help? Because I'm with you. I was reading this and thought, I'm all for this. People should be judged on outcomes rather than just long hours or good intentions. But it feels like the media reporting of it is like, this is a bad thing. And this is, and I don't really understand that, because if we want the economy to grow, we want things to happen, we want to make impact in the world, surely this is what we want.
I agree. I even saying that it's a fiery memo, right? Like it's very direct. It's very intense, maybe to some. It might be shocking to a few. But again, I would rather have this approach of, I feel like she is being honest here and perhaps even authentic here.
Yes. Yeah.
So if this is what you want, this is what you get. Now you know where you stand. Now you know what's expected of you, which I think sometimes that's all employees really want. Is to know what's expected and how is their performance being judged. It sounds like it's all laid out right now.
And it is, I think also it's recognizing that this is going to be uncomfortable for people because it is going to be different. And it just comes down to helping people navigate that difference and that is going to feel uncomfortable. And that's okay. And I think we sometimes worry too much that it's going to upset people or people aren't going to be happy about it. But actually, you can't control other people's emotions. Like, let them, I'm a big fan of that book. And I think this is what this screams to me, is that actually, to your point, be honest, come out there and be real about stuff, be genuine about it, and then let's make some stuff happen. And it's hard to argue with that, I think. The next article is a global survey, and the headline of this was Global Survey Reveals Workplace Culture Gulf Between Execs and Employees. Now, according to DHR's Global's latest research, a significant disconnect is emerging between how corporate leaders and junior staff experience workplace culture. The firm's second annual Workforce Trends Report, which surveyed 1,500 corporate professionals across North America, Europe and Asia, uncovered a troubling pattern. While executives champion culture as a strategic priority, entry-level employees remain largely disconnected from that vision. Now, the data reveals quite a big perception gap. So it says 70% of C-suite leaders described workplace culture as very important. Only 37% of entry-level employees agreed. Executives were 2.5 times more likely than their junior colleagues to view their organisation's culture as well-defined. When asked what matters most, the survey showed employees have a nuanced view of their cultural priorities. Nearly all respondents acknowledged that workplace culture affects their employee experience, with 53% calling it very important and 40% saying it was somewhat important. However, the enthusiasm for it really stops there. Only 36% believed their company culture was well defined enough to drive performance. The disconnect becomes clearer when examining how employees describe their current cultural reality, with nearly half of respondents, that's about 46%, characterised their organisational culture as reactive and inconsistent across teams, while another 15% found it vague and not actively shaped by leadership. Great. So my question for you is, how can comms and HR close this cultural gap?
I want to know if Citigroup CEO Jane Fraser had filled out this survey. And this isn't a dig. I would love to know what the stat that stood out to me about the 77% of C-suite leaders describe workplace culture as quote unquote very important. I would love to know where she would vote on that, because that's more interesting to me that there's 23% of C-suite leaders that say culture actually is not very important, which to me is could be a very loud voice in a room. And so if there's a significant amount, I count 23% as pretty significant, of leaders who say, yeah, culture is not going to matter, then of course, when you look down the line, there's going to be inconsistency across teams. So if you've got a leadership team of 10 people, per these numbers, 8 are going to think culture is important, 2 are not. So those teams that are the 2 are probably going to behave very differently, or culture is going to look very differently than the other side of people that would vote there. I actually was a little bit surprised that only 15% found it vague. and not actively shaped by leadership, I actually would have thought that would have been higher. Very few organizations I've worked for have I felt like the culture was absolutely nailed and the value was there and everybody knew what it was. I found there's a ton of ambiguity when it came to culture. In fact, I'm of the belief that you have a company culture that is ultimately made up of a bunch of microcultures that exist within teams. There's going to be some different behaviors, different ways teams interact. That's fine. That's like a living organism in there. So I don't know that comms and HR can actually close that gap unless you can start demonstrating this is why culture is so important. If culture is not important to you, then maybe this isn't the organization for you. But as long as there are leaders who say culture is not important, then it's not going to be important.
And you're right, that 15% feels quite low. But when you add that to the 46% who said that their organisational culture is reactive and inconsistent across teams, that's 61% who are saying it's just not really working.
Well, again, let's go back to Citigroup. This memo comes out, I guarantee you that culture reacted. It should react to that. It's not like, nope, we're rock solid. Nope, this is how we are over here. When your leader is over here saying something like that, it absolutely should react. So I don't know that a reactive culture is actually necessarily a bad thing.
I suppose it depends on how often it's reacting. And I think that's probably the issue, isn't it? It feels like it's a bit, frenetic or whatever. Like, I think that would be hard to operate in. But I do think I think you're right. I think it's a hard gap to close for comms and HR when actually there's so many different elements that make up a culture. The thing I was thinking about with this was some of the kind of foundational things like competency frameworks and stuff like that measure behaviors and things. I feel like they've disappeared a little bit over the years, and I don't know why, and maybe I need to read into a bit more of that. But in the clients I'm working with, where we're looking at culture shifts and we're looking at leadership behaviors and all of that, and I'm going, we need some sort of framework here. A competency framework that allows us to measure people or hold people to account of a set of behaviours guided by our values. Otherwise, you're just guiding things by your own lived experience, which is really difficult in terms of creating a culture that people can kind of get behind and be aligned to. And I just don't know why some of those things that for me feel quite foundational seem to not be being used as much as maybe they were 20 years ago. Maybe we just got bored of them. I don't know. Let's go on to some Gallup data, because apparently I can't stop talking about Gallup over the last 6 months. They dropped an email into my inbox this week, which was called Span of Control. What's the optimal team size for managers? And because we've talked about this shift for managers in organisations a lot in the last year, I was quite keen to dig into this. So it talks about the fact that the reduction of managers, the bigger teams that come as a result, all signalling for a poor employee experience, and the data basically says the same. So they say that increasing the number of direct reports to a single manager, often called span of control, isn't just structural change. It fundamentally reshapes the role of the manager and changes what it takes to practice effective leadership. Now, this is US data, but according to the Bureau of Labour Statistics, there is roughly one manager for every 11.5 employees. And Gallup data shows the similar pattern. So the average number of people reporting to managers has increased from 10.9 in 2024 to 12.1 in 2025. And this is nearly a 50% increase in team size since Gallup first measured in 2013. Now, Gallup go on to suggest there are 4 questions that shape the span of control. They talk about the fact that uncertainty about the future effects of AI on team size and employee management may add extra pressure to define this ideal span of control. But they suggest that the answers depend on 4 factors. So these are their 4 questions. How engaged is the team? How much time do managers spend on individual contributor work? Do managers have the right talent for the role? Do managers give employees meaningful, regular feedback? The key takeaway from this is that team size is only as effective as the engagement behind it. So highly engaged teams of 12 or more workers who are supported by effective management, double the current median of 6 workers per team, can thrive, while poorly managed teams struggle even when they're small. Now, this tracks to what I've always said, which is it doesn't matter if there's 7 of you or 7,000 of you in an organisation. Effective communication is the thing that's going to make or break it. And I stand by that and have done for about the last 20 years. So my question for you is, what do you think about these 4 questions? And do you think they would be enough to shape the role of the line manager in organisations? Because the headline of this is also that the role of the manager has to change if we're changing the span of control.
Yeah, I think when you look through the questions, they're great questions to reflect on. But going back to a phrase that I keep close to me from my friend Julia Markish, only ask what you can act upon. Mm-hmm. So do managers have the right talent for the role? Yes or no? If no, well, what are you doing about it? Our company is making that investment. Do they give regular feedback? Yes or no? Okay, they do. Great. If no, no. What are you doing about it? So it's really comes down to, are there any action items related to this? What's interesting to me is thinking back to, let's talk some math here.
Okay.
Let's say you're a manager of 10 people. You got 10 people that work for you. If you spend just an hour a week individually with each of those people, that's 25% of your 40-hour work week right there, which probably means you're probably working more because you also are an individual contributor in addition to managing a team of people. And let's say you even check in with them daily. That's only 10 minutes a day. All of a sudden, that's a quarter of your week. So even looking at those numbers, we've shared some previous stats where some companies are now close to 20 people per manager, and that manager still has a job, which means you're not set up for success. We've talked about this within our industry for a decade plus about not properly supporting managers. Now we're simply seeing the data act out on it. Managers catch it from both sides. They've got to manage an employee team, but also they are an employee who reports to someone who is probably also part of a team and gets dumped on. So they're also feeling it there as well. So it's a systemic issue that's been plagued for a long time. And I think it can point to the fact of when we simply got rid of people managers, when people simply just managed a team. And that's what they did. They did not, that was their job. Yeah. And now that we've given them a job, and oh, by the way, you're also managing 12.1 people now. Woo, I don't know. Can you be successful? I'm going to say it take a pretty rare breed of person to pull that off.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the ask the questions that you can actually address, right? And I think that's always true in any kind of data. And when I did research into the role of line managers back in 2021, which came about because people were saying during the pandemic, we don't need line managers anymore. The role of the line manager is just dead because why do we need them if we're all just, work? And I was like, ah! So I did some research into it. And one of the biggest things was understanding the difference between empowerment and autonomy and being clear about that. And the majority of managers that we spoke to were saying, I don't have control. Either I don't have control over my budget or I don't have control over my people. Like there's something I don't have control over and therefore makes it really hard to actually manage and get stuff done. And I hear that a lot, like the budget or it's the people or whatever it is. And I think the whole world of management needs looking at in work and actually what you're expecting people to do. And one piece of advice I would give is to come up with what is the guide to being a manager in your organization. And if you don't have that, that's the thing that I often come back to is what does it mean to be a manager in this organization, and get that documented and get that kind of, shared and discussed and part of the cultural furniture. Because I think that's important.
I think that first question too, I think is kind of fascinating to me when you talk about how engaged is the team.
Yeah.
It's engaged in what?
Yeah. Well,
right? Because let's say you're a Citigroup employee. Now, I love that I keep coming back to this story. Yeah. That's now what you're engaged in. You're probably not engaged in your day-to-day task anymore. You're probably looking around seeing who else is going to be laid off, who's working long hours, who's not getting results. That's now what you're engaged in. Yeah. So I think oftentimes that's one of my biggest challenges with employee engagement is like engaged in what? Yeah. What are we looking for here?
And I have got one more today because I've done a U and got 5. And this is a post that I saw on LinkedIn. And this is this satisfaction gap between employees and leaders and what they think good communication looked like. This was a post from Lars Hank and it came up in the last week on LinkedIn, and it shared the different view that employees and leaders have. He shared survey results from 2022, 2024 and 2026 that examined corporate communications and the impact through the organisation. And it seems that this is specific to change communication, having read the post. While top managers continue to grow more satisfied with the communication around transformations in their organisation, employees continue to move in the opposite direction. In 2022, there was a 13% gap. In 2024, it was 22%. And now in 2026, it's 30%. He says in the post, what began as a misalignment is becoming a structural divide, raising the risk of misunderstanding, resistance, and change fatigue. Beneath the numbers lies a deeper, more fundamental issue. Organisational communication is not built with the receiver in mind. Now, my question for you is that the numbers feel like a bit of a trend in that they're only going to go higher. And how do we reverse this?
Well, I think before reversing it, you have to stop it. You have to hold it there, or else that trend's going to keep going. And maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but it really seems like we as communicators, whether we're doing the communication or we're advising on the communication, we're doing what leaders want. And so, of course, they are satisfied in it. We are not doing what employees want. We are not asking employees, what do you want, and doing it in ways that they want to receive it. To his point, we're not built with the receiver in mind. And so I think that's it. How do you hold that? How do you start balancing that with what leaders want, what leaders expect from communication, but also in the style and ways that employees, the front line, whoever that is, in ways that they want? Because once you balance that satisfaction, it's like you're never going to have you're not going to make everyone happy. But would you rather have 70% of leaders and 30% of the rest of employees, or would you rather have 50-50? I'd probably take 50-50, because that other 50% is going to be a larger percentage of your population. Not to say that that's the best way to look at that, but I think that demonstrates we are very reactive to leaders, not at all to employees, what I'm seeing. And I think we need to start paying more attention to what do employees want in their style, still deliver what leadership needs out of communication, but in the ways that employees want it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we are still too skewed the other way. I know, but I'm being very nice today. But the use of the word receiver in this really took me back to my communication A-level and the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. And I don't even know if you know what that is, but
I don't.
It was literally like sender, receiver, and then there was like something in the middle. And it's just taken me back to that. And I suppose when I read this, it was disappointing to see those percentages change. But I also feel like we've been talking about this for such a long time. And it's that frustration, I suppose, that sometimes comes out for me of, what is it going to take to really make a difference with leaders, with managers and organisations to get this right? And because I spend a lot of time helping people be less chaotic by improving communication, I see this every day, and I'm starting to see why it's happening. And I'll talk about that another day. But it's just, I've gone right back to my A-level. So thanks to myself for making me go there. Now, what are you freaking out about today? Because that's the end of our articles.
Well, I'm going to circle back to basically what we kicked off at the beginning of the start of the year. I will say personally, I am a very political person. I am freaking out about ICE. What I'm seeing on TikTok, on Instagram, in the news, wherever it is, how we are treating people in our country. When we say our country, the United States of America. I remember years ago, this was probably back in the very first Trump administration. I was at an international event and people were kind of mocking the US and mocking Trump and whatever. And I sort of rolled with it because that's what you have to do. And there's actually somebody, a Brit, spoke up and he's like, you're a German living in Spain. You'll always be a German in Spain. And you're all these things. He's like, anybody can be American. And I thought, well, that is truly what makes this country so great, is that it is a nation of immigrants. That is what built this. But the fact that you're seeing Native Americans getting picked up and detained by ICE, Native Americans getting picked up and detained by ICE, just shows that this is not about immigration. It's not about immigration. It's about something far worse. And it's something that a lot of us who are white have to start recognizing and dealing with. And that is what I'm freaking out about.
Yeah. And
Native Americans. Native Americans are being picked up by immigration officials. I just can't. I can't.
I can't. I saw something today, actually, that was like a 5-year-old boy has been picked. And I was like, I can't. I can't.
So when you talk about the things that I post on typically Instagram, often I add the same title to it, which is cruelty is the point. Not that is the point. This is an administration based on cruelty, and we're seeing it played out, and they seem quite proud of it. And I have to like to remind people who voted for that side, this is what you voted for. Mm-hmm. People tried to warn you, and you said, no, it's not going to be like that. Well, guess what? You now get what you voted for. We are an international embarrassment, and we're harming people on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, my freak out's going to feel really insignificant there.
Well, no, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, but we've fine. Said like we weren't going to not be political on this podcast, but also I am.
We can't not yet. But also you can't not talk about it. You can't, right. I mean, we could get into the Brooklyn Beckham saga instead. We could really talk about that, because I have to say that the memes are bringing me some light relief this week. But my freak out this week is LinkedIn and consultants. And
you're right. This is not anywhere close to mine.
I know it's not, but it's really. No, I'm not going to swear. I get very frustrated with people, and I think this is LinkedIn's fault more than anything. So LinkedIn keeps going suggested post at me, like every other post is not someone in my network, and it's a lot of talking about this is everything that you're doing wrong, this is what you should be doing right, but I'm not going to help you do that. I'm not going to give you any guidance on that. I'm not going to do a webinar to help. Like, where's the help? Like, where's the stuff to do that? And I mean, I have a very big service ethos, and we're both very, very similar in that from a values perspective. So I always try to, create a PDF, or I do an Ask Me Anything where you can turn up for free. Like, there's stuff we do, that is here to help people that are working in organizations to improve comms, leadership, employee experience. And I've had enough of the people that are just throwing rocks and not doing the work to actually help people. And that's, I think, LinkedIn's fault more than anybody else's, but it's just pissed me off this month.
It's very kind of you to blame LinkedIn. However, LinkedIn is not creating the posts. I just like to point that out.
It's surfacing them, and it's surfacing a lot. And I think that's why it feels like
so
it.
So LinkedIn is rage baiting you.
Yes, and it's worked.
And the posts are the bait. Yeah.
And it's worked. And here I am. Well, thank you for joining us this week. All of the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes. And don't forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so that you don't miss another episode. And pass this along to someone that you think would enjoy listening or watching, because don't forget, we are also on YouTube. Thank you to Poet Ali for contributing the music to the show. And we're back every Monday with more news, insights and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.